Did you know that during the 19th century Africa was a battleground for European powers? Imagine a continent ripe with resources, its vast potential largely untapped by European eyes. This was Africa in the late 1800s. European nations hungry for raw materials and driven by imperial ambitions saw Africa as a prize to be won. The scramble for Africa had begun, a period of intense competition where European powers raced to claim as much African territory as possible. The race for Africa was fueled by a potent mix of economic, political, and social forces. Europe's Industrial Revolution created an insatiable demand for raw materials, and Africa, with its abundance of rubber, diamonds, gold, and other resources, became an irresistible target. Beyond resources, European powers saw colonial possessions as a measure of national prestige. A larger empire meant greater power and influence on the world stage. The scramble for Africa was a competition to be the biggest and most powerful empire. As European powers carved up Africa, tensions inevitably rose. Border disputes, competition for resources, and differing colonial approaches led to frequent clashes. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, Italy, and Spain all vied for a piece of the African pie. These tensions sometimes spilled over into direct conflict, with European powers engaging in skirmishes and wars against each other on African soil. The scramble for Africa was not just a race for land, but a struggle for dominance. European powers employed a variety of tactics to secure their claims in Africa. Unequal treaties, often signed with African rulers under duress or through deception, were a common tool. These treaties granted Europeans sweeping concessions, including control over land, resources, and trade. Military force was another favored tactic. European armies, equipped with superior weaponry, often faced fierce resistance from African societies, but the technological gap proved difficult to overcome. Section 5. The lust for resources and the civilizing mission. While economic greed was a major driving force behind the scramble for Africa, it was often justified under the guise of a civilizing mission. European powers argued that they had a moral duty to bring progress and enlightenment to what they perceived as backward societies. This paternalistic attitude was used to legitimize colonial rule and mask the brutal realities of exploitation. Africans were seen as subjects to be ruled and Christianized, their own cultures and traditions dismissed as inferior. Section 6. The Berlin Conference carving up a continent. The Berlin Conference of 1884–85 marked a pivotal moment in the scramble for Africa. This conference, held in Berlin, Germany, was attended by representatives from various European powers including Britain, France, Germany, and Portugal. These nations were eager to expand their empires and exploit the vast resources of the African continent. Convened by Otto von Bismarck of Germany, the conference aimed to regulate European colonization and trade in Africa. Bismarck, the German chancellor, sought to avoid conflict among European nations by establishing clear rules for the colonization process. The conference was seen as a way to bring order to the chaotic rush for African territories. The irony was that no African leaders were invited to this conference that would decide the fate of their continent. The decisions made at the Berlin Conference were done without any input from the people who lived in Africa. This exclusion highlighted the imperialistic mindset of the European powers, who viewed Africa as a land to be divided and conquered. The Berlin Conference formalized the Partition of Africa, drawing borders with little regard for existing ethnic or cultural boundaries. The arbitrary lines drawn on maps often split communities and forced together groups with long histories of conflict. These new borders were designed to benefit the colonial powers, facilitating their control and exploitation of African resources. This arbitrary division would have long-lasting consequences, sowing the seeds of future conflicts. The legacy of the Berlin Conference can still be seen today in the form of ongoing ethnic tensions and border disputes in many African countries. The decisions made in Berlin over a century ago continue to impact the lives of millions of Africans, illustrating the profound and lasting effects of colonialism. Section 7. A legacy of exploitation and resistance. The scramble for Africa had a profound and devastating impact on the continent. European powers, driven by the desire for wealth and resources, carved up Africa with little regard for the existing cultures and societies. This period, known as the Scramble for Africa, saw the continent divided among European nations, leading to a legacy of exploitation and suffering that would last for generations. Colonial rule led to widespread exploitation of resources, forced labor, and the suppression of African cultures and institutions. European colonizers established systems that prioritized their economic interests, often at the expense of the local populations. Mines, plantations, and other resource extraction operations were set up, and Africans were forced to work under harsh and inhumane conditions. Africans were subjected to brutal treatment, their land and livelihoods often confiscated. Entire communities were displaced to make way for European settlers and their enterprises. The social fabric of African societies was torn apart as traditional leaders were undermined and local customs and practices were suppressed. The impact of these actions is still felt today, as many African nations continue to grapple with the legacies of colonialism. However, the story of colonialism in Africa is not just one of victimhood. Despite the overwhelming odds, Africans did not passively accept their fate. Across the continent, resistance movements emerged, challenging European domination and fighting for their rights and freedoms. These movements were often met with brutal repression, but they demonstrated the resilience and determination of the African people. Across the continent, Africans resisted European domination, often paying a heavy price for their defiance. From organized military campaigns to guerrilla warfare and peaceful protests, the methods of resistance were varied and widespread. Leaders like Samurai Ture, Ya Asantewa, and Shaka Zulu became symbols of the struggle against colonial rule, inspiring future generations to continue the fight for independence. From the Ashanti Empire to the Zulu Kingdom, Africans fought back against colonial encroachment, demonstrating courage and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. These acts of defiance were not just about reclaiming land and resources, they were about preserving the dignity and identity of African peoples. The legacy of these resistance movements is a testament to the enduring spirit of Africa and its people. Section 8. Echoes of the Scramble Africa in the 21st Century. The legacy of the Scramble for Africa continues to shape the continent today. The echoes of colonialism are still felt in the political, social, and economic fabric of African nations. From the bustling streets of Lagos to the serene landscapes of the Serengeti, the impact of history is evident. The Scramble for Africa, which saw European powers carve up the continent with little regard for existing ethnic and cultural boundaries, has left a complex legacy that African nations are still navigating. The arbitrary borders drawn during the colonial era have left many African nations grappling with ethnic tensions and territorial disputes. These borders often split communities and force together diverse groups, leading to conflicts that persist to this day. In many regions, people live with the daily reality of these divisions, which affect everything from local governance to national politics. Yet, amidst these challenges, there are also stories of resilience and unity, as communities work together to bridge divides and build a shared future. The economic systems put in place during colonial rule often benefited European powers at the expense of African development, creating lasting inequalities. The extraction of resources and exploitation of labor left many African economies dependent and underdeveloped. However, the continent is rich in natural resources and human capital, and there is a growing movement to harness these assets for sustainable development. Modern African economies are diversifying, with investments in technology, education, and infrastructure paving the way for a more prosperous future. Despite these challenges, Africa is a continent of immense potential and resilience. The vibrant markets, innovative youth, and rich agricultural landscapes are testament to the continent's dynamism. African entrepreneurs are leading the way in tech innovation, creating solutions that address local and global challenges. Agriculture, a cornerstone of many African economies, is being transformed through sustainable practices and new technologies, ensuring food security and economic growth. In the 21st century, African nations are asserting their place on the global stage, working to overcome the challenges of the past and build a brighter future. African leaders are actively participating in international forums, advocating for fair trade, climate action, and global cooperation. Cities across the continent are rapidly modernizing, with new infrastructure projects enhancing connectivity and quality of life. Innovation hubs are springing up, fostering creativity and entrepreneurship. The spirit of Africa is one of hope, determination, and progress, as the continent moves forward with a vision of unity and prosperity. Section 9. Uncovering the Past, Shaping the Future. The Scramble for Africa is a stark reminder of the human cost of imperialism and the importance of understanding history. By learning about this often overlooked period, we gain a deeper understanding of the challenges facing Africa today and the interconnectedness of our world. It is a call to action to engage with the legacies of colonialism, to support African voices, and to work towards a more just and equitable future for all.